welcome to Cover Story. This week we shall be following up on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's announcement that he wants to do away with the Planning Commission. In its place, he wants what he says a new body with a new soul. He has also asked for ideas to help develop this new think tank. And to help him do that, we've put together a panel of 4 experts. I have with me in the studio Professor Mr. N.C. Saxena, former Secretary Planning Commission, Dheeraj Nair, economist and also a political analyst. Soon who will be joining us will be Arun Maira, former member Planning Commission, and Rajiv Kumar, former Secretary General of FICCI. But to begin with, Dheeraj, how viable is this plan? Or rather, Modi has said that he wants to do away with the Planning Commission. Should we see this in political tones? Because even the Congress, if you recall, there were ministers like Praful Patel and Kamal Nath who had systematic run-ins with the Planning Commission. So is this something, an idea whose time has come?
I think definitely the idea of the Planning Commission is now outdated. It was formed in the 1950s in a different era where the economy was totally planned. So the Planning Commission was responsible for allocating resources across the economy. Now, of course, a lot of this stuff happens in the private sector, but there's still the matter of allocating government resources.
Exactly.
So the central government allocates resources to various ministries, the central government allocates resources to states. So the Planning Commission still performs this role, and I think as Chief Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi didn't like the fact that the Planning Commission played this role. He objected to the fact that bureaucrats were lecturing elected chief ministers about this. So I think it's fair enough. I mean, that old planning era is over, but the resource allocation role still needs to be done. So I want to know, and Mr. Saxena would be a better person since he's worked there, is that who will do this role? Will it be completely taken over by the finance ministry? Will the matter of state spending be devolved totally to the states? Is that the way forward? And will this body just be the think tank thing, giving ideas, doing sort of policy advocacy for the government? I mean, that's something, the mechanics is something which still has to be worked out, though the idea to replace or reform the Planning Commission is a good one.
Mr. Saxena, do you have any solutions to some of the problems Dheeraj has outlined?
In fact, as Dheeraj said, we have to decide who would be doing the functions which are at present performed by the Planning Commission. Of which the most important is allocation of about 3.5 lakh crores which Planning Commission does to the central ministries. Then it also decides whether what kind of new schemes will be introduced. We have to also decide the future of the planning ministry, which has about 2,000 people. Now, one role of the Planning Commission has become redundant, which is allocation of funds to the states. So, Mr. Modi has seen Planning Commission from the eyes of the state governments. Because what has happened in the last 30-40 years is, earlier, much of the allocation from the central government used to go to the states via the Planning Commission. Now, much of this allocation goes to the states via ministries. So, Planning Commission does not pass on resources to the states. Planning Commission strengthens education, health, rural development, and they in turn pass on tight funds to the
tight
states.
Funds is the key over here.
That's right.
Yeah.
Earlier, it used to be untied via the Planning Commission. So, from the state's point of view, Planning Commission has become redundant.
And
that function needs to be changed. But regarding the ministries, that function needs to continue.
We also have joining us Mr. Arun Maira, colleague of yours. Mr. Maira, we've just been discussing what should replace the Planning Commission, what kind of a new body. Do you have any solutions? Because, funds have to be allocated. How will that work?
I've heard Dr. Saxena, and he was my predecessor and my senior. He was secretary long before I became member. But yes, we treat each other as friends and colleagues. There are two things. One is to do with the allocations, which he has talked about, and the other is what other functions should a central body in the country perform in this day and age, which would help the process of development to be more equitable, faster, more effective. But let's get to the allocation process, and Dr. Saxena is right that somebody has to do the allocations, and perhaps, let's say, a body like the Planning Commission should do it. But the way it does it is very important for the country to get the benefit of having a body of persons who's applying their mind. My experience in the last 5 years in the Planning Commission was that this allocation to sectors was a fairly mechanical process. You took what was the previous allocations and then you tweaked around them. And when there were times to say, well, look, we'll have to cut down the overall allocations because the economy is not doing that well by, say, 15 or 20%, what would be done is everything. Every sector would be cut 15 or 20%. Now, that's not the way to do strategic allocations. In fact, it could be that if the overall availability is 15-20% less, one might say that some sectors mustn't be touched at all. And other sectors' requirements may be cut 30-40%. But that's not what is done even within the Planning Commission, where application of mind should be there regarding the relative importance and priorities, the relationships between different sectors in the growth and development of the country. So the point very much is also about the quality of the process and the people that are in the Planning Commission to do the function that the country does need, which is what Dr. Saxena said. So that's regarding allocation. We can go to the other one. There are several other processes.
Okay, I'm going to just interrupt you and get in Mr. Rajiv Kumar also, who's waiting, and we'll come back to this. Mr. Kumar, your first words on this. What kind of a body should replace the Planning Commission, and how do we cut this red tape?
Well, the body that should replace the Planning Commission must be one which looks at the Indian economy very much in the context of the global economy. And therefore, it has to take on board the fact that India is an open economy today. India has tradables and non-tradables, and therefore, to continue to focus on intersectoral balances, it has to take on board the fact that India is an open economy today. India has tradables and non-tradables, and therefore, to continue to focus on intersectoral balances and do sort of planning of allocation of investment resources, etc., is not required. The other question the other suggestion that I have very clearly in my mind is that given the very large, much larger role of the private sector, the body that replaces the Planning Commission must have its representatives on it, so that the Planning Commission becomes a body where the central government, the private sector, and the state government representatives are all represented as equal partners, and they take a view on the issues facing the economy.
So there should be private sector participation also, you're saying?
Must be doing is to create long-term. Absolutely, the private sector participation should be there. The third thing that I'm trying to say is that I'll bring to your notice is that the Planning Commission must be a body that focuses on some critical sectors which are imposing binding constraints to the growth, to India's growth. So there is no need for the Planning Commission at all times to continue to look at every sector, in the economy, but focus on critical sectors, but do that within a long-term scenario, long-term vision framework as to where the Indian economy wants to grow, and then scan the frontline technologies, the investment requirements, the way the inter-ministerial, inter-government coordinations to get that growth going.
Okay, Dheeraj, I can see you want to...
Just to summarize 4 things. Long-term scenario building and vision.
Yes, sir, finish your sentence.
Second, the inclusion of private sector, state government and central government. And third, to focus on selected sectors for every, for any point of time, rather than be producing plans, which are just all over the place and which don't focus on the issue or the problem at hand.
Streamline focus, I think, Dheeraj.
Yeah, I think, I'm not entirely sure the idea of another think tank is what we necessarily need. I mean, we have a lot of good ideas already in this country. Most of us know what is to be done. Even if you look at the old Planning Commission's documents, there's a lot of good stuff in there. It's just that it doesn't get done. And when earlier in the program you spoke about Kamal Nath or Praful Patel or other ministers in the UPA objecting to the Planning Commission, it was because the Planning Commission was seen as putting up more roadblocks to the problems we had rather than finding practical solutions. So I think what this body really needs to do, and we can accept Mr. Rajiv Kumar's suggestion that it should focus on sectors involved private sector, but look for solutions. We have plenty of ideas. We have the reality which is detached from the ideas. So we need something to bridge this gap. How do you get roads done? I mean, how do you actually get? We know we have to build roads. We know we want to build high-speed trains, but how do you get this done on the ground? Center, state coordination. That should be the role of this body. More than planning into the future, which could be a small role of it, what we need is solutions for the present.
So I think what he's saying is less planning and more implementation. The new think tank should be implementation driven.
In fact, you are right that the problem of development is more at the state level because it is the states which are not doing so well in respect of education, health, sanitation, gender issues. These are all, according to our constitution, state subjects.
Do not go.
Unfortunately, you know, the quality of staff in the planning commission, I mean, the present company is always an exception, but if you look at for the last 30 years, members are generally appointed on the basis of political patronage. Principal advisors and advisors who come from the IAS, they regard this as a condemned post or as a parking lot. They stay there for 5-6 months and they leave.
But do you agree with what Praful Patel and Kamal Nath said, that planning commission is more a roadblock than a helping hand?
So therefore what happens is, if your knowledge function is not credible, if you are not able to be a good think tank and have some kind of credibility, then it would appear to the ministries that you are just causing roadblocks, and they would look upon your interference as oppression, as tyranny. And that is what it had been reduced to.
Okay.
Therefore, the ministries are very happy. But who knows, all these functions may be given to the new organization. The new organization may be stuffed with defeated politicians and useless IAS officers. And again, all those ailments.
Same body with a new name.
Yes. Same body with a new name.
Okay, let's bring in Mr. Myra on this. Mr. Myra, do you think there should be less politicians and say more professionals and private sector people on this body?
No, I think we need to get, before we come down to what sort of people we should have there, we should be very clear about the functions this body is required to perform and the capabilities needs to have. Then the third will be what people would be required.
So do you agree with what Dheeraj said about the functions? There should be more implementation driven rather than...
No, let me let it down.
All right.
There are some dots here. There are some dots here we need to connect, please. Dheeraj has said about implementation and less planning possibly in an ivory tower, but more implementation. Rajiv has said very rightly that, look, focus on sectors in which we need to get more attention and get more results. For example, the whole manufacturing sector, the industry sector in India has done rather badly the last 20 odd years. So if one had to say which sector, one of the sectors that the country must focus on is growing jobs through manufacturing, okay? Then Rajiv made another point. Get the people from the private sector, and most of manufacturing is in the private sector, involved with this process of planning, okay? You get them then involved with the process of planning. So here am I, and he said, get private sector into the planning commission, and I am from the private sector. I was in the planning commission. I was looking after the manufacturing industry sector. So I did.
So where did you go wrong?
What has to change about, not me,
the
where
planning
the
commission
institution has to change.
Yes.
The institution has to change in the way it engages with people who have to get things done. It has to engage with the states also who have to get things done in a different way. It cannot be sitting aloof from them, over them, telling them what to do without much experience in itself, as Dr. Saxena said, about how things are actually working. So the process of planning must be done by the people who have to implement. It has to be done together. We have to, in this country, modernize our view of what is planning. And I'm a little worried about people calling it a think tank. The model we have in our head about think tank is, once again, people who are cut off from the actual doing, who write some papers and from some pedestal preach about what should be done, which is the Planning Commission presently anyway. So what we want is a different learning institution which enables the whole system, the people who have to do, to learn together. Another word introduced by Dheeraj is very important: coordination. This is the key. When you have many independent actors in a system, as we will have, independent states, independent private sector organizations, the results for the whole are produced when they work more effectively together. Even our ministries are becoming independent silos, as the Prime Minister did say, taking each other to the Supreme Court even. We've got to get a body in the center, in the place of the Planning Commission, that induces collaborative thinking, collaborative work. It doesn't have to do it itself. The need to collaborate must become very manifest to the people in the system themselves, and processes created for them.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Mr. Rajiv Kumar. I can see you have something to say on this.
Yeah, you know, I just want to carry on with what Arun has said, which is that the body should be able to effectively engage with the ministries, with the other governments, etc. And let me therefore make a dramatic suggestion on this regard, that as long as the new body, the new planning commission, does not have its roots, its legitimacy in the constitutional framework of India, this will never be the case. At the moment what happens is that this planning commission is taken as a fifth wheel by all the ministries in the central government. The state governments listen to it only as far as they are getting an allocation from the planning commission, which, as Dr. Saxena pointed out, is no more relevant because it goes to the ministries. So therefore the planning commission is not taken seriously at all. So if you actually want this new body to have the kind of clout or even the ability to engage effectively with other ministries and governments, etc., to first design a road ahead and then to monitor and get it implemented, it should actually, the government must be bold enough to create a constitutional amendment and create a body and give it the constitutional validity. As an executive order, it will remain at the pleasure of the Prime Minister. As long as the Prime Minister listens to it, has more than one meeting a month, the people know that the head of the Planning Commission has the ear of the Prime Minister, they will listen to it, but even only to that extent.
So, Mr. Kumar, are you suggesting a more powerful body, say like the Central Election Commission or something?
Agencies and bodies.
Actually,
I think so. If you really do need to, if you think the function is important, then give it the legal, give it the statutory basis that it needs. And once you've done that, then you can charge this new body by saying that you are the one responsible for intergovernmental, interministerial, interagency coordination. Please focus on the few sectors like manufacturing, infrastructure, education.
Right. Mr. Myra wants to come in on this. Mr. Myra, you seem to be agreeing with Mr. Kumar.
There is no way that you can hold it accountable.
No, I am disagreeing.
You're disagreeing.
With
I also want to disagree.
with regarding the means by which this body will have effect. He's very right that this body must be taken seriously. Now, there are two ways that one can be taken seriously. One is one has more constitutional authority or large amounts of budgets that one doles out, and thus one expects to be taken seriously. I would say that in the country today, in terms of our maturity of our institutions and the relationships between them, we have got the situation where constitutional bodies are having to fight for their place, and they're fighting each other, as it were, the executive, the Supreme Court, the CAG, and so on. To create yet another body, we will come to the situation that Rajiv described as a fifth wheel. I think rather than creating yet another constitutional body, we need to have, what I'm going to use a good word, a good process by which the alignment between other constitutional bodies like the states or like the private sector is constitutionally independent now, that they can align themselves and get things done together.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Mr. Saxena. He wants to come in. I'll just bring in Mr. Saxena.
I'm slightly disagreeing
Let me complete my point. Let me complete my point.
Go ahead, Mr.
I think what Rajiv said is important, that it be taken seriously, that this body's function and its weight be taken seriously, for which it must be credible itself. It must be credible in terms of its people and its... Yes.
Okay.
Slightly disagreeing with what Rajiv and Dr. Mehra are saying.
Third point of view, I like that.
Therefore, let me give an example. Now, Planning Commission on the whole has been playing a reactive role, not a proactive role. 2 or 3 examples. In 2011, UP government was reporting that 92% rural households have got toilets. When census was taken, this figure was only 25%. Now, up to 2011, neither the Planning Commission nor the Ministry of Rural Development ever pointed out that your figures are bogus. Similarly, when the National Family Health Survey was done in 2006, it came out that 43% children were were malnourished. Governments were reporting, state governments were reporting only 8%, and only 0.5% children being severely malnourished. What I'm trying to say is that your role has to be find out what is happening in the field.
Okay, Dheeraj,
the main problem was lack of accountability, and that Planning Commission was also not being doing its work properly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot which has gone wrong with the Planning Commission.
They will never. Nobody will take the Planning Commission seriously.
Yeah, Mr. Kumar, come in, then we'll get Dheeraj.
I think,
which is why you needed to give it a some statutory body.
The problem, of course, is that even if it's given a statutory recognition or constitutional amendment, people may still not take it seriously if it continues to act as the same roadblock in a dictatorial manner, detached from the ground, poor on its facts. So those things still need to be fixed, whether it's statutory or not. The fact is, as Mr. Saxena says, if you're not even doing your information gathering properly, if you're not monitoring what you're supposed to be doing, that means you're not even performing that basic role which you were meant to. So when you're talking about reinventing an institution, you should also see that the very basic things it was supposed to be doing, it was not doing at all. And maybe those are things which need to be done. I mean, some body at the center maybe needs to monitor the states, needs to, in fact, Vivek Devroy wrote a piece in the Economic Times about data. I mean, the government system doesn't have good enough data on things, and after all, policy depends on data. So maybe this body is responsible for getting us accurate data from the ground on what's actually going on, because ultimately, when you allocate money, decide policy, you need to see outcomes, right? And if you're getting faulty data, if one state is telling you 92% is already done, when it's actually 40, then it's a problem, right?
25.
So what is, I mean, this, so the data collection or monitoring and putting it out in the public domain, not only don't keep it within the system, give it out to the public, let there be public debate, let there be public recognition of the facts.
I'll just give, we're running out of time, I'll just give the final round of words. We'll start with Mr. Rajiv Kumar. Your final words on this, the final thoughts from Mr. Modi.
Yeah, my final word is that the Planning Commission has to be has to have very high quality professionals with the highest level of academic and intellectual integrity and honesty, and its best role could well be to be the conscience keeper of the government, not only in the center but in the state, so that it subjects everybody to a kind of if you like a technical audit, but not in terms of the conscience keeper of the government, not only in the center but in the state, so that it subjects everybody to a kind of if you like a technical audit, but not in terms of the CAG, but in terms of what their facts are, but at the same time effectively coordinates the roles in specific sectors where further action is needed. But it will all depend upon the quality of professionals that come into the central into the new body, because without that, if you populate it with bogus people, it will only do bogus work.
Mr. Maira, your comments on this?
Yeah, two comments. One is about what functions it must perform, which is it must be looking ahead on behalf of everybody, on behalf of the states, on behalf of all the ministries, even on behalf of the private sector, on what's going to happen, what may happen, what sort of actions in the country could make good things happen. So much better scenario planning rather than the 5-year budget plans that it makes. The second is implementation. Implementation is going to have to be done by independent actors and their coordination. Much better skill in the Planning Commission to enable this coordination to happen inside the country. The third thing is about the authority of this, that's the main point actually, about the authority of this body. Its authority must come from the quality of what it is and what it does, and not be given constitutional authority or budget authorities when it does not have the capability to have a good effect. People should want to come to the Planning Commission for advice, not be saying I have to go there because they're going to give me the money, so I have to take their advice.
Okay.
Then the quality does not improve.
Mr. Mehta, I'll have to interrupt.
No, I agree with Arun that Planning Commission already has a lot of authority. You don't have to pass a law regarding Planning Commission or make any constitutional amendment. But the unfortunate fact is that it has been doing the knowledge function very poorly. So therefore, in the eyes of the state governments as well as Government of India, it is seen as a nuisance, as an interfering body with very little credibility.
So
now, in order to improve credibility, you have to have people with caliber and who are not appointed on the basis of patronage, and they must be supported by very capable staff.
Fair enough. Dheeraj, you can sum it up.
Yeah, I think authority, I agree with Mr. Maira, comes from what you do and who you are. So I would look at populating this body very differently. I think at the end of the day, the expertise it brings is very important. So while it's important to have a good share of academics, thinkers, you should also have people who've been project managers, CEOs, people in the public, from the public sector, private sector, who've actually worked and getting things done on the ground. So I think that's one component at the top. But even the bureaucracy, I think Mr. Saxena is right. It cannot be populated just with IAS officers, disgruntled IAS officers, or other people who are parked there for brief periods who are not really interested in it. It should be a dedicated cadre of people who will work as a cohesive unit and bring credibility to this institution. And as Mr. Myra said, once there is quality there, people will come to it for advice, people will come to it to solve problems. Right now, people only want to shoo it away because it creates problems.
Part of the red tape. Okay, one final thing, if I may, if you were going to give a name for this new think tank, what would your name be? Just quickly, we are really running out of time. Mr. Kumar, I'll start with you.
National Development Research Council.
Ah, that's a good name.
Reforms Council. National Development Reforms Council.
National Development Reforms Council. Mr. Myra, what would be your name for this?
I would call it the National Systems Reform, and I can use the word Implementation Commission, on National Systems Reform and Solutions Commission.
All that is needed is take a painter and wherever planning is written, substitute it by reforms. Other things will after remain the same. After 5 years, you'll find we are in the same boat as we were before.
Dheeraj,
So I think the Reforms and Solutions Commission.
Reforms and solutions. Well, that's all. I think what we're all agreeing on, that there is a need for reform, there is a need for a system that delivers and a system that is filled with capable people. But that's all that we have time for this week. Thank you for watching this edition of Cover Story, and we'll see you again same time next week.